Good morning. My name is Karina Coleman, and welcome to the May 14th meeting of the Board of Administration for SDCERS. I'm first going to ask Cynthia to call the roll. I understand that Paul Kaufman is out today.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Spoon.
Present.
Mr. Shearson.
Hello, yes.
Ms. Mayen.
Hi.
Mr. Maji.
Morning.
Mr. Lotes.
Present.
Mr. Hawquist.
Present.
Ms. Calora.
Here.
Mr. Bartolotta.
Here.
And Ms. Coleman.
Here. All right, great. Just a couple of rules before we get started. When you're going to be voting on action items, it will help to state your name first. This makes it easy for Cynthia. And then also, I want to thank Mr. George Kinney. He is our outgoing board member. We have several new board members coming to join us, so we're going to have introductions in just a moment. And certainly want to welcome back Bobby Spoon for her second term, and she's serving on our B&G committee as chair. So I wanted to make those announcements. So I'm going to turn it over to our first new board member, Brett Bartolotta. If you would just please introduce yourself, give a brief background, and then also the role or committee you're going to be serving on for the board, that would be great.
Okay, great, thanks. Yes, Brett Bartolotta. I am lead deputy city attorney for finance and disclosure with the City of San Diego City Attorney's Office. I focus on the city's financial disclosures, so financial statements and anything connected to bond and loan, bond issuances and loans for big capital projects. I will be serving on the investment committee, and I'm happy to serve.
Great, thank you. And now an old familiar face, Natasha Calora, if you would please introduce yourself and give your background.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. I'm Natasha Calora, Executive Director of Special Events and Filming for the City of San Diego. And I was actually a previous trustee on the board. I was with the city, for about 8 years as the Director of Corporate Partnerships and Development. I left for a brief stint over at the Airport Authority, which is another one of our plan sponsors. So lots of familiarity with the SDCERS board and with the topics at hand. And I am a member of the Disability Committee.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over now to Paul Lotsey.
Hi, Paul Lotes. I'm with the fire department. I've been with them for about 10 years. And after helping the new hires, some of the guys have been around for a little bit longer, increase their retirement readiness just through education on what they have, they chose to elect me as their board member, and I'm happy to be here. Okay,
great. And our next board member, Sarah Mann, if you would please give a brief intro, and also if you're serving on a committee for the board and your background.
Sure. I'm Sarah Mann. I'm an assistant director with Department of Finance. I've been with the city for about 22 years. I started in the comptroller's office. Now I'm in the newly merged Department of Finance. I will be serving on the disability board as well as the governance.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you all for offering your time and service to this civic cause, so very much appreciated. The next thing we have on our agenda, I'm going to ask Cynthia if we have any public comment.
No public comment.
Okay, great. So now we're going to move to our consent agenda items, and we have several here: the service retirements, the deferred retirement option plan drop entries, the deferred retirement option plan drop retirements, and training and educational conferences. And do we have someone to move on those?
I'll move those. Lou Maggi.
Thank you, Lou.
Charlie Hogquist, I'll second.
Okay.
Perfect.
We are ready to vote. Ms. Coleman,
Yeah.
Mr. Bartolotta,
Bartolotta, yes.
Ms. Calora,
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist,
Aye.
Mr. Lotz,
Aye.
Mr. Maggi,
Yes.
Ms. Mann,
Yes.
Mr. Shearson,
Yes.
Ms. Spoon.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, great. The next action item we have relates to the election of the new board president. Ms. Carol Broad completed her term at our last meeting in March. And now I'm going to recognize Greg Rademacher to give a brief overview of this process for the board.
Thank you, Karina. It's a pleasure to see everyone this morning. Before the board is an action item to appoint a nominating committee and a chair for the election of board president. As Karina mentioned, Ms. Broad's service to the SDCERS as board president ended on March 31st, 2021 with the completion of her board service. And fortunately, our SDCERS charters policies provide for the vice president, Karina Coleman, to take over the presidential duties, including presiding over SDCERS board meetings until such time as the board elects a new president. So our current board policy provides that when the board needs to find a new president, the board shall appoint a nominating committee and chair at their May meeting, which is today, to recommend a new president for the board's consideration at their July meeting, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting. Any board member may indicate their interest in being president to the nominating committee chair or recommend another member for the position. The nominating committee will consider all candidates and recommend one candidate for the board's consideration at the July meeting. So today, the board needs to appoint a nominating committee and chair, and it would be best to have less than 6 committee members to facilitate scheduling meetings and conference calls and to avoid a quorum of the board. So Interim President Coleman, would you like to suggest a committee and committee chair?
Yes, sir. So this is kind of a voluntold opportunity in the sense that we have a lot of new committee members, and Paul is absent today. So with that in mind, my nomination or my suggestion, my recommendation for the nominating committee would be Bobby Spoon, Cliff, Shearson, Lou, and Charlie. And so I would ask to have a move and a second, if that is in order.
Excuse me, Karina, could you maybe suggest a chair for the committee?
Oh, yes, of course. I would like to suggest that Bobby Spoon be the chair.
I'll move. I'll second.
Okay, great.
I just need to know who's second.
Oh, that was Calora.
Okay. Okay, we are ready to vote. Ms. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Bartolotta,
Yes.
Ms. Calora,
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist,
Aye.
Mr. Lotz,
Aye.
Mr. Maggi,
Yes.
Ms. Mann,
Yes.
Mr. Shearson,
Yes.
Ms. Spoon.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, wonderful. So we are now going to move to the Disability Committee, and I will be turning it over to Charlie Hogquist, who is our Disability Committee Chair, to provide the board an update. It looks like all of the action items were approved by the committee yesterday.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Yeah. Charlie, your audio went out. Sorry, your audio went out, Charlie.
Did we lose Charlie altogether?
Charlie, are you there? You may be on mute.
No, I got kicked out.
Oh, no. Welcome back. There you are.
I got kicked out and came in, and as I was trying to speak, you couldn't hear me. Yes, to answer Karina's question, we had 4 action items yesterday. All 4 were approved by the Disability Committee in unanimous votes. And we'll go through them in a second, but I did want to check with Cynthia to see if we did have a speaker on one of the items.
No speaker.
Okay. Our 4 items yesterday involved a staff recommendation to deny a disability retirement to Tamara Scott. And if anybody has any questions about that from reading their material, we'll entertain those now. If not, we'll move on to the move to approve that recommendation. Hearing none, I move to approve that motion.
So we're going to do them all
Actually,
together at the same time, all
I'll do
4.
them all together. Yes, I'll do all 4.
Okay.
Sorry. The second was the staff's recommendation to approve a continuance of a matter due to family matters, which we also approved. The third one, item 3, was to deny the industrial disability retirement of Giorgio Avalos. Sorry, I'm going back and forth between my computer screen that has my listing and my Zoom tablet. And number 4 was the recommendation to deny the non-industrial disability retirement of Earl Grievers, who did in fact speak at yesterday's matter. So if there's no questions or comments, I will move that these items be approved. Hearing none.
We are ready to vote. Ms. Coleman?
Yeah.
Mr. Bartolotta?
Yes.
Ms. Calora?
Yes.
Mr. Hawquist?
Aye.
Mr. Lodes?
Aye.
Mr. Maji?
Yes.
Ms. Mayen?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Ms. Spoon?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much.
And the last
Go ahead,
thing we
Charlie.
did have yesterday, Sandra did present a disability status report, and I did want to just commend her and the staff again in the fact that they're processing our applications very efficiently and taking care of our members. So again, to all the staff, thank you very much for all that good work. And that concludes the disability.
All right, perfect, Charlie. Thank you for that update. And now we're going to turn over to business and governance, and I will turn over the floor to Bobby soon.
All right. Well, we met yesterday, and we welcomed 2 new members, Paul Lodes and Sarah Mayen. We approved 6 action items by unanimous vote. And before I review all the action items, are there any board members that would like any of these action items pulled from the consent agenda? No? Okay. So let me go briefly discuss each item, and then we'll make a motion to approve the entire agenda. The first item was the annual cost of living adjustment. It was presented by Marcel. The board is required to determine the annual change in the Consumer Price Index and pay retirees and beneficiaries a cost of living adjustment benefit. The calendar year change in CPI was 1.4%. Some retirees and beneficiaries may be eligible to receive up to 2% due to having suffered past inflation damage. A complete listing of the COLA benefits is included in our staff report. The second item, presented by Johnny Tran, the recommendation to direct staff to issue an RFP for investment counsel. The contracts with legal firms that help with investment manager contract negotiations are up for review. Staff will be issuing an RFP for investment counsel services, and we are hoping to have the committee review the staff recommendations at our next meeting. The third item was the staff's recommendation to amend the contracting policy and delegation of authority to execute contracts and other documents, also presented by Johnny. Johnny's a busy guy. The contracting policy and delegation of authority is a very important document. This amendment further clarifies the roles and responsibilities on selecting legal counsel and banking services. The fourth was presented by Cynthia Queen, and it was the recommendation to amend Rule 6.50, the election to extend the drop period. The initial rules on when firefighters needed to submit their election to extend the drop period were found to be overly restrictive and causing member service issues. The city and SDCERS worked together to find a better solution. The fifth one, to amend, again presented by Johnny, the recommendation to amend the whistleblower policy. The proposed amendments to the whistleblower policy clarify the whistleblower protections along with other non-substantive, just textual changes. The sixth was staff's recommendation to amend Rule 2.90. Johnny Tran, again presenting. Johnny needs to stand up today and take a bow for all of this work. This item is an update of the process when the board approves the changes to actuarial assumptions, which we did for the 2019 experience study. So this, in effect, simply updated the rule to include the most recent studies. And that's it for the consent agenda. So I move for the consent agenda. Ms. Joyner, will you call the vote?
We're ready to vote. Ms. Coleman.
Yes.
Mr. Varalata.
Yes.
Ms. Colora.
Yes.
Mr. Hawquist.
Aye.
Mr. Lotes.
Aye.
Mr. Maggi.
Yes.
Ms. Mahan.
Yes.
Mr. Shearson.
Yes.
Ms. Spoon.
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, great. Well, we're moving right along here.
Karina?
Oh, do you have a few other things to add on, Bobby?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
We heard reports. We heard reports from Cynthia and Marcel and Dave Bond. The reports from Cynthia on member services is that due to the increased volume of calls to the call center, they've had to add staff, which they have done, and they're hoping to have one last vacancy filled in the future. But their statistics are absolutely great, so they're keeping up with the increase in volume. Marcel reported on the updates to the pension system related to the assumption changes that the board approved in June 2019. And those changes will be effective with the July 1st, 2021 period, and they're on track to be updated. And we also got an overview on the status of Prop B, which was, as we all know, invalidated by the courts. And the city is in the process with negotiating with all the labor unions at the present time. And as soon as that negotiation has been completed, the staff is ready to implement all the details. So they're on target. There's not going to be any delay as soon as the labor negotiations are over. And Dave Bond gave us a very informative report based, with all the news about cyber attacks and cybersecurity. He gave us an overview of what has happened with SDCERS. He highlighted the contractor, White Hat Trovantis, who did our external and internal penetration testing on all of the systems over in the past. Using those tools and a team of ethical hackers, which is a new occupation, ethical hackers, White Hat Trovantis found very few vulnerabilities, and they reported, quote, that they had great difficulty finding any exploitable vulnerabilities, and that our environment is pretty locked down. So SDCERS immediately remediated the very few facts that were found in the penetration test. And then we were provided with written reports from Johnny for legal and compliance, Ted from the finance division report. A shout out to Ted because he did appear before City Council and with the approved budget this time. And Ted produced the financial statements, and Marcel, the members owing in excess of $10,000. And that's it. Back to you, Karina.
Okay, great. Well, that gives us all comfort that we have good cybersecurity in place. The next item we have is going to be the Investment Committee, which met yesterday, and we covered two action items. The first is Aon's capital market assumptions and asset allocation review, and the second is Aon's portfolio structure review. So I will turn now over to Aon Steve Voss to walk us through these items.
Thank you, Karina. This is Katie Comstock with Aon Investment.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I am joined by my colleagues, Steve Voss and Ashley Lacey, and we do have two very important agenda items today, which we covered yesterday in detail with the Investment Committee, and that is our asset allocation and our structure review. We plan to hit the highlights here, but the full pack is included, so to the extent there are questions or you want more detail, we can certainly go there. These are two analyses that we run on an annual basis, and they're two of some of the most important governance procedures that you all do have in place to make sure that the investment portfolio is being managed appropriately. There have been a lot of changes to your asset allocation and to your structure over the past 10 years. A lot of work has been done, and so the past few years have been more so finding refinements and tweaks around the edges, and that's the case today. So generally what we have found is that the portfolio is in good shape, but we do have two more refinement recommendations that we'll be touching on in a bit. If we could please flip ahead to slide 4, we're going to hit on asset allocation first. And this is important. This is really what drives the returns of the portfolio. And we're talking about how we're allocating the assets across different asset classes, but we're not just starting from scratch here. We start with the asset liability study. And that is an analysis that we do every 3 years with your program, and we have the next one is coming up. We'll be kicking off in the summer. And the main output from the asset liability study is finding the appropriate level of risk for the portfolio. And so over the past 10 years, that study has consistently supported a risk level of 78% to return-seeking assets, and those are assets that are intended for growth, to grow the assets of the portfolio, and a 22% allocation to risk, what we term risk-reducing or a safety portfolio, those assets that are intended to provide downside protection and protect the assets in stress market environments. So within that framework, that's when we get into asset allocation. How do we construct the return-seeking portfolio and the risk-mitigating portfolio? And some of the things that we factor into that when we're trying to determine that, we list here. And first and foremost is understanding SDCERS specific circumstances, your time horizon, which is long-term, the need for return. You all have a 6.5% actuarial assumed rate of return. They've been prudent in, this has come down over the past several years as expected returns in capital markets have come down, and we'll see how that has played for your portfolio here in a bit. But the portfolio is also underfunded, so there is a need, again, for growth and to make sure that these investments are working as hard as they can for you all to help close that gap. Certainly liquidity is important. The plan needs to be able to pay benefits on time, and so understanding the liquidity profile of the portfolio and the different asset classes that are being invested in is something that we review in depth as well. Ensuring appropriate diversification. This is possibly one of the greatest risk management tools that you all have at your disposal, is making sure that you are diversified across asset classes and understanding how the asset classes work in conjunction with each other across different market environments. And so we study that as well. We think about inflation protection, both short-term and long-term, and making sure there's components in the portfolio to address potential inflation. We're very mindful of costs, ensuring that the costs that are deployed are being rewarded and at a reasonable level and it was in line with expectations. Flexibility. Your investment policy is probably the most important guiding document, and so it's important to have that structure and to follow it. But there's also a balance of being able to have, not making it too rigid where it impedes your ability to be nimble and to take advantage of some aspects that could benefit the portfolio. And you do have an opportunity allocation that provides you all this avenue to add value through a prudent and a governance process that's appropriate. And then lastly, resources, ensuring that you all are allocating within the means that you have available, the resources that you have available to you all. And so all of these factors are things that are considered when we look at asset allocation and determine whether it is appropriate or whether changes may be needed. If you flip ahead one page, I just want to spend a minute on looking at just how asset allocation fits within the overall investment strategy setting process. We touched on this, but this is just a nice illustration. We start with the asset liability study, again, something that we do every 3 years. It sets the strategy in the context of the liabilities. And again, we have that coming up here. We'll kick that off in the next couple of months. From there, we'll talk about asset allocation. So the green is what we're talking about now. How do we construct the return-seeking and risk-reducing portfolios, making sure that we have a long-term focus and we understand the needs of the portfolio. And this is really what drives your investment returns. Policy is going to drive the success of the portfolio. And then investment structure is going one layer deeper. And we'll talk, this is the second agenda item that we have today. And this talks about how do we implement that asset allocation? What are the types, numbers, and right managers to implement each of these asset classes? We flip ahead 2 pages. We'll get to some of the takeaways and then bring this to life a little bit. But overall, the portfolio, the asset allocation, we think continues to be appropriate for your needs and circumstances. You have diversification across your return-seeking portfolio across 6 major and commonly used asset classes, both across traditional equities and fixed income, as well as alternative investments. Within alternatives, you do have a meaningful allocation there. Roughly 34% of the portfolio is invested across private real estate, private equity, infrastructure, and the opportunity allocation. And this has been a very impactful part of your portfolio, and where we see the greatest bang for your buck, if you will, in terms of enhanced return and getting growth from taking on investment and illiquidity risk. Now, being mindful of that, again, we do still are aware of the liquidity profile, and so we stress that. So not just making sure that in normal times that there's enough liquidity to pay benefit payments, but we also stress that. So in very stressed economic environments, we understand if there will be any pain points with liquidity, and there haven't been, and we'll again do that in detail during the asset liability study as well. I mentioned the opportunity fund where that provides you all flexibility to the extent that there are attractive opportunities that become available, or there are smaller investments that may not require a new asset class or a change in the investment policy. The opportunity allocation allows you all to invest in those securities or those investments that can benefit your portfolio. And you all have taken advantage of that. Roughly 6% of the portfolio today is invested in the opportunity allocation. And then downside protection, you all have the 22% to U.S. core high quality fixed income, and that is there as a safety portfolio that has been structured as such, and that'll be there when you need it. And so factoring in all of these, there are no major changes to the portfolio. As I mentioned, there was one kind of refinement recommendation that we made, and that is as it relates to your emerging market debt allocation. You currently have a 5% allocation to emerging market debt, and our recommendation is to just broaden that bucket to be a return-seeking fixed income allocation. So emerging market debt is just one kind of sector under the broader return-seeking fixed income bucket or category. There are other things in this category such as high-yield bonds, bank loans, other structured credit pieces that we think can benefit the portfolio. And by broadening this category will allow you all to rotate in and out of those sectors as they become favorable. So having the flexibility to diversify that bucket can provide long-term strategic benefits to the plan. I do want to flip ahead to the last page, it's all the way to page 27. And this will hopefully bring all of this to life. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but please do jump in if there are questions or if I'm speaking a little too quickly here. On page 27, what we have here are the investment policy, the numbers on the left-hand column show your current long-term investment policy. And so you can see there's a roughly 39% allocated to public equities across both U.S. and non-U.S. markets. The 22% represents your safety bucket within U.S. fixed income. Then there's emerging market debt allocation, where we have a recommendation to broaden that to return-seeking fixed income. I'm going to stick with the current policy for now for just a minute. And then the last four columns reflect your allocation across alternatives. Roughly 34% is allocated there. And when we aggregate this all together, we get an expected long-term return of roughly 6.4% for the current policy. Now, this is slightly below your actuarial assumed rate of return, which is 6.5%. Some of the things that have been driving the expectations lower is that we're near all-time highs of equity valuation. Yields are at historic lows, and we've seen correlations across asset classes rise, which kind of chips away a little bit at the diversification benefits. So we're not surprised, and this has been really industry-wide, where we've seen expectations in capital markets come down. That said, we do think that this is within a reasonable range of your assumed rate of return. And I'd also note that it's important not to lose sight of how well the portfolio has done in the past. Over the past 10 years, and coincidentally over the past 25 years as well, on an annualized basis, the total fund has earned an 8.3% return over the past 25 years. And so well above the current assumed rate of return, as well as what it had been in the past. And so you have essentially reached into the future and have pocketed those returns today. So we don't have any recommendations for major changes. There is not one silver bullet that will increase that return within a reasonable risk level that we think that you should make any changes here. But we do have, as I mentioned, some refinements, and that recommendation is to broaden the emerging market debt allocation to a broader return-seeking fixed income bucket. I won't focus on these numbers, but what I want to focus on is the direction that we think this change will move the portfolio in, and that is we expect it to modestly increase returns by having flexibility to rotate within different credit sectors and reduce risk of the portfolio. So generally increasing the risk-reward expectations of the risk-reward nature of the plan. So overall, in good shape. We will be doing the detailed asset liability study coming up, where we'll reassess the risk level and the asset allocation. But for now, we think that the portfolio is in good shape with the modest recommendation to broaden the emerging market debt allocation. I'll pause before we get into structure. Are there any questions or comments, reactions?
Katie, I do have just a clarifying comment question. So the 6.41%, that does not assume any alpha opportunities on the public portfolios. Is that correct? But the private or private expected returns do include the alpha component.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That's correct. We try to make our assumptions as practical as they can be, so they're intended to be what a reasonable investment program can reach. So for the publicly traded asset classes, these are assumed to be passively managed, which you can get very low cost. With the alternatives, there is no passive listed option, and so we do take out an investment management fee, a reasonable fee. And so these are, we do add alpha. I'm getting different topics mixed up, but we do add a return premium because they are actively managed. Now they are conservative. I will note that we do look for these to be a median expectation. And if you look at the performance that your advisors have been able to achieve, they are north of our expectations for these alternative investments. But yes, there is active management baked into the alternative asset classes.
Great. Okay. Any questions from other board members? Otherwise, this item passed unanimously at yesterday's investment committee. I will be happy to move this recommendation. I think it does make sense to diversify the return-seeking income portfolio beyond emerging market debt into other areas that the managers can have discretion to invest in on a relative value opportunity basis.
Okay, we are ready to vote. Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Bartolotta?
Yes.
Ms. Calora?
Yes.
Mr. Hawquist?
Aye.
Mr. Lotes?
Aye.
Mr. Maggi?
Yes.
Ms. Mahan?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Ms. Spoon?
Yes.
All votes are in. Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, and then the second item that Aon covered was the portfolio structure review. Katie, do you want to cover that briefly as well?
Yes, thank you. I'll hit just the highlights, and then we do have one recommendation here, another more of a refinement, and we'll be kicking that over to Ashley to cover that recommendation. But if you want to flip ahead, if you believe it's 2 slides of page 6. Thank you. Portfolio structure, as I mentioned here, we're going one layer deeper and talking about how do we implement the asset allocation, what types of managers, what coverage do we want to make, what do we want to have, whether we want to take active or passive management, where do we want to take active management, and making sure that the managers are continuously providing the exposure that we think that they are providing. And so again, we look at this on an annual basis. There has been a lot of work that y'all have done to make the structure very efficient, very streamlined over the past 10 or plus years. And so we do have just one refinement which comes out from time to time within your non-US equity portfolio. And if you actually flip ahead 2 more pages, I'll just hit on some of the key themes that we look at and that the takeaways from the broader review, and then I'll turn it to Ashley to talk more specifically about our recommendation. But where we focus a lot of our attention is on active risk and where to spend those active fee dollars. And so as I mentioned in the asset allocation review, you do a meaningful allocation to alternatives. And this is where we like to see those investors that can do this have a meaningful allocation here, because we think that that's where you'll get enhanced return, skill-based return, and can get best rewarded for the risk that's being taken. Now, that being said, within the public markets, we have done a lot of work to make that be as efficient as possible, while also taking advantage of some pockets and areas where we think that there can be added alpha. And so the portfolio has added a decent amount of passive management across the public equities. Roughly 50% of the publicly traded asset classes are passively managed. Much of that is within U.S. equity and large cap equity in particular, which is a very efficient market and has proven very challenging for active managers to add value. And so here we're getting very low cost passive exposure. And we're taking active management where we do think that it has highest likelihood of being rewarded. So within small caps, within non-U.S. equity, specifically within emerging market debt, emerging market debt, but emerging market equity, and global equity, where managers have the flexibility to rotate across sectors and styles, and are not just focused on a specific region or style. We look at this, we look at active risk on a regular basis. We do include the active risk analysis in the quarterly reports, and so that we are reviewing and understanding where we expect active risk to be taken and ensuring it's coming from the areas where we'd like it to be coming from. And we review again if the managers their investment processes are playing out as we would expect them in the market environment that we would expect them, and how they should be doing. We are constantly reviewing for the opportunity allocation, seeing if there are attractive investments that may be suitable for your portfolio. Right now you have managed futures, real estate debt, and some opportunistic credit allocation, which we do think are all sound investments, and we continue to look for things that are attractive and vet those with your investment team prior to bringing them forward to the investment committee. So generally, they're in very good shape. You all do have a very diversified, efficient, streamlined structure. And so we do have one recommendation within the non-U.S. equity bucket, and I'll turn it over to Ashley to touch on that.
Sounds great. Good morning, everyone. If we could turn to page 19, I will touch on the recommendation today. And this is within our non-U.S. equity portfolio, as Katie had mentioned. So I'll start by giving a snapshot of what the portfolio looks like today, and then look at the enhancements we're looking to make to the portfolio going forward. So you can see here that on the right-hand side in the pie chart, the portfolio is well diversified with 5 active managers. Again, most active management is being taken in areas where we believe managers have the best chance to add value, areas like international small cap and emerging markets. The long-term target for this portfolio is about 14%, and the current allocation at the end of 2020 was $1.5 billion. You can see at the bottom the fees are fairly low at 27 basis points, and the projected tracking error or active risk is moderate at 0.8%. This is largely due to the high allocation to passive management. The BlackRock ACWI X US Index Fund is approximately 70% of the overall portfolio. And this really resulted from a rebalancing that we did last year, where we noticed that emerging markets portfolio was a bit overweight, so we rebalanced that back to be at market weight. And to do so, to keep the overall structure neutral, we increased the passive allocation. So we took a step back after that and thought how to potentially enhance the portfolio and maybe bring that passive exposure back down. It was about 60% before the rebalancing. So thinking about getting passive back to about 60% and active to 40%. And so when we look at the observations of the current portfolio today, there is a slight underweight to large cap stocks, and there's also a slight value bias within the portfolio. The value bias is currently being driven by the manager Brandis. Brandis, you can see in the right, is the largest allocation of active managers in the portfolio, and it's a large cap international mandate that does focus on the value-oriented parts of the market at 13.5%. So where we really saw a gap in the portfolio is in the large cap growth space, and this is something that we were looking to fill that gap in, while also maintaining a neutral structure of about 70% developed markets and 30% emerging markets. So essentially our overall recommendation is really a slight modification, and overall it's resulting in an increase of active management back to 40% while keeping that size and style neutrality of the portfolio. And the next page really just illustrates this. It's a little bit hard to see, but the upper left-hand corner has the slight value bias. You can see it's not huge because, again, the overall portfolio is highly passive, but it does exist, so we're looking to bring that down a bit. And then you can see in the bottom middle chart, the relative distribution, that large cap growth is really the area where it is lacking a bit in the overall portfolio. If we move to page 24, I'll just highlight the recommendation and the steps that would need to be taken to get there. Essentially, we're, again, looking to increase that active exposure, and how we're looking to do that is by conducting a search for a new manager and hiring a complementary large cap manager in the total international space. So this manager will have expertise in both developed and emerging markets, we do prefer these broader mandates as they have greater flexibility and greater opportunity to add value. The manager that we're looking for will be complementary to Brandis, so we'll likely have a quality growth type of bias. And this will help balance out that value bias that we see today and also help redistribute the contribution to active risk across the active managers within the portfolio. So overall, the recommendation that we're looking to vote on today is this new structure that will consist of next steps of conducting a search for a new total international or MSCI ACWI ex-US mandate that is complementary to Brandis, and then rebalancing the portfolio to bring down that passive exposure and to ensure that the structure is neutral by style, size, and region as well. Pause and see if anyone has any questions on the recommendation.
No questions. I'll just comment we've seen a great rotation in the value of late, so it might be an opportune time to find a complement to Brandis. So thank you for the work done on this piece. Great. As I mentioned, this item passed unanimously at yesterday's investment committee meeting. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the recommendation on portfolio structure and implementation as outlined. And Cynthia, if you'll call the roll.
Ms.
Call the vote. Yes.
Mr. Bortolotta?
Yes.
Ms. Calora?
Yes.
Mr. Hallquist?
Aye.
Mr. Lotz?
Aye.
Mr. Machi?
Yes.
Ms. Mann?
Yes.
Mr. Shearson?
Yes.
Ms. Boone?
Yes.
All votes are in. The motion passes 9-0.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Other than that, from the investment committee meeting yesterday, we just had a couple of informational items, and those are in the meeting materials. It was the risk reduction analysis update on that timeline, as well as the request for proposals for investment counsel. With that, I'm going to ask if there are any questions or comments from any of the trustees or staff. And I do know that Greg Rademacher has some comments to make. So unless anyone wants to jump in ahead of Greg, I will turn it over to Greg.
Looks like Cliff has his hand up.
Cliff.
Thank you. I have a quick question from Aon and the staff of what sort of timing can we all expect for a discussion of this new international large cap growth manager?
Thank you. We'll get to work with your investment team right away on a search where we'll work with our global investment manager research team, and your investment team will need to do due diligence as well. So likely the next meeting we think we could have a recommendation, and if not, certainly by September we will. So we'll get to work on that right away.
Okay, just for information. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Bobby.
Karina, just in theory, will there be a change in the allocation based upon the changes in Prop B? I mean, now that it will be an open plan?
Yeah. So I think this goes back to the triangle that Aon showed us at the top of the meeting where you discuss the asset liability. I think that's sort of, we'll go back to that step in the process once that is all determined and ironed out, and that will be reflected in the next go round of the asset liability study. I don't know if Steve or Katie would like to tack on to that answer, but that's my understanding. I mean, it is critical. It does impact the obligations of the plan, and it does have to be taken into account more formally as part of our process.
Yeah, this is Steve Voss. I just add on to that and reiterate what Karina said, that we would work closely with your actuary to understand the changes in cash flows and understand the changes in the nature of the liabilities that you have. The timing is actually decent for this because we had already planned as part of your policy to conduct an asset liability study so that things are sequentially lining up appropriately in terms of timing. Once we have that information from the actuary, we'll go through our models, share it with you, share it with the investment committee, and then make possible recommendations on changes of liquidity or possible recommendations on changes of your mix between return-seeking assets and risk-mitigating assets. But it's premature to state what impact, if any, would be warranted as a result of Prop B change. Thank you for the question.
Any other questions, comments? I am not necessarily seeing in the Zoom environment any hands up. So I will turn it over to Greg Rodemacher for some comments.
Well, thank you, Karina.
Sure.
First, I would like to recognize and welcome Natasha, Sarah, Brett, and Paul for their board service, and we really look forward to working with you in the years to come. And thinking of the future, we anticipate having 3 new appointed board members join us at our July meeting. This would be Lisa Marie Harris, Michelle Bush, and Louis Wynn. And their appointments are now officially scheduled on the City Council agenda for May 18th council meeting. I'm glad to say that we did not wait for the appointments, and the orientations are about 99% complete, and we expect to have those fully completed prior to our July meeting. I will share that staff has really thoroughly enjoyed meeting all 7 of our new board members, and we're really excited to have them on the board and really looking forward to the coming year. I think we've got a really great lineup and a lot of diverse skill sets. It's going to be a good board year for sure. I wanted to give you a quick update on our compensation study project. You may recall we have an outstanding project that is on my board-approved 2020 CEO goals to conduct a compensation study for the leadership teams and other key professionals. As previously reported, our HR Director, Colin Brazil, is working with the city's personnel department to update job classifications and salary ranges based on the compensation study's results. And I'm very pleased to say on April 24th, the City Council approved phase 1 of our project by changing salary ranges in the city salary ordinance for existing SDCERS positions, namely the Chief Investment Officer, the Assistant Investment Officer, the General Counsel, Deputy Retirement Administrator, and Medical Review Officer. And as part of phase 1, we also had additional unclassified position added to our investment team, kind of fixing a structure problem that we had from the past. And these changes will be effective July 1st, 2001. So staff are working with the City Personnel Department on phase 2 to effect additional salary range changes which require creating new positions such as retirement internal auditor. These items will require review before the Civil Service Commission prior to consideration by the City Council to put them in the salary ordinance. So just giving you a brief update on that, and we'll keep you apprised as that project moves forward. Quick Prop B update. As everyone is probably pretty aware, the Superior Court's written opinion for the city to remove Prop B from the City Charter Municipal Code is now final. The 60-day appeal period has run out without any appeals being filed. I was chatting with Marcel the other day, and I really thought this was going to happen 3 years from now. So it is really fantastic that we are able to resolve this, or the parties were able to resolve this sooner rather than later. The city is starting negotiations with its represented employee organizations. And as we know, SDCERS is not a party to this litigation or a party to these negotiations. SDCERS is working as experts to support the city and the REOs as they have been working towards finding a resolution for this. And I will say that SDCERS staff have been actively engaged in supporting the city and our stakeholders as they start to move forward. Internally, SDCERS staff, I imagine eventually all of our staff, as we're a team of about 50 people, everybody's going to have to lend a hand with this project at one point or the other. Unfortunately, we have an internal task force that is comprised to coordinate our efforts, and I am very pleased that Marcel is shouldering the responsibility to be our project manager. So we are staffed up and ready to go forward with that. I would like to take a few moments for some staff recognition. I would like to take a moment to recognize Liza Crisafi for serving as advisory faculty at the National Conference on Public Employees Retirement Systems and SDCERS upcoming Chief Officer Summit. Thank you, Liza, for stepping up and being part of our pension community. I would like to recognize Jessica Maloney for representing SDCERS as a panelist on the California Association of Public Retirement Systems, CalPERS, Communications Roundtable addressing COVID operations solutions when counseling members. Thank you, Jessica. Joe Saucedo for serving as CalPERS Information Technology Roundtable Chair, who also spoke on security role matrix assessment and completion. He was also successful in roping in our very own Chief Information Officer, David Bond, to present at his roundtable on SDCERS Business Continuity Plan and our recent successful disaster recovery exercise. Thank you both, Joe and David. I would like to recognize Serena Valenzuela for her leadership in managing an unanticipated Verizon phone outage so the call center could continue to serve our member calls. So thank you, Serena, for your leadership in stepping up and taking care of that. I would also like to recognize Ted LaSalvia, as Bobby mentioned, for presenting the SDCERS budget to City Council on May 11th. Similar to last year, Ted and I did a brief, succinct presentation, similar to Ted's budget presentation to our B&G committee this past March. We were also fortunate to have Marcel on the line as a subject matter expert in case any of the questions from the City Council needed additional help. Fortunately, the City Council follow-up questions really focused on Prop B, on the reopening. They are very concerned about that and our ability to administratively support them on that. We also had one public comment from a retiree who challenged SDCERS to do better helping retirees who don't have computers. It was a very notable comment, and it's something that we have been working on. So it stemmed from when we did not have a remote call center, but we rectified that this past June. So all in all, the City Council expressed appreciation for the work performed by SDCERS and expressed their appreciation to the Board of Administration. So with that, I say thank you, and this concludes my remarks.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg. And now we are going to be going into closed session. If you are not part of closed session, please disconnect at this time. Close your Zoom meeting.
So, Karina, we need just 1 minute here to disconnect as well from streaming, from broadcasting, I mean. I'll let you know when we're ready.
customer care service, it was water department, once again, but they were outlining services. And
Uh-oh.
using the web to actually look at your
I
water
think,
usage and what your projected
oh no, I'm not.
savings were and what your projected cost would be for that month.
Tabitha, I need to be connected to audio. It seems like it's disappeared or something. What
do you mean?
It says join audio, and I should have been joined already. See, I was trying to connect me.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for the kudos. I appreciate that.
I thought you.
I heard my name. I'm like, what? Who? What? Hi.
Okay, there it is. Thank you. You ready, Michelle?
Are we displaying? We're not.
Say what?
Is Zoom sharing? Yes.
One more minute. We're not ready yet.
Yes, it said it's current. I mean. No, in on-base, it said it's current.
It's already said it's current. Here.
I see that. Can you set as current? Just click set as current, please. Thank you.
Yeah, it's already said it's current. Okay. Okay. Okay, Karina, y'all can go ahead. Could you hear me?
No, we're not getting audio.
I'm sorry, Karina. Wait 1 minute. We're not hearing you, but don't go away yet. Sorry.
When you left, did you hang up anything? Did
Nope.
you not touch anything?
Nope. There's nothing to touch.
Yep. Okay, I need to dial back in now.
You want me to get up?
Yes, please. So are we connected to audio or not?
The Zoom? Yes.
Can you call out the number for me, please? Do you have the sheet? Do you have? Did you print it out?
I do. Here, wait. I think I have it right here.
Thank you. 669 900 9128.
Welcome to Zoom.
99.
Enter your meeting ID
99.
followed by pound.
31.
99173.
You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
4279.
You entered 99317342779. This meeting ID does not exist. Please Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You entered 99317342779. This meeting ID does not exist. Please re-enter your Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue. You have entered the meeting as a panelist. Attendees can now hear you speak.
And then Carol liked them another way, so if you have any changes, the way you like them or don't like them, let me know how to support you.
I'm pretty easy.
Okay, we are back. We had some technical difficulties, but we are ready.
Okay. Cynthia, we're back in session. I'm going to ask our General Counsel, Johnny Tran, if he's out.
Thank you, Karina. So the board met in closed session on March 12th and May 14th, 2021, to discuss consideration of specific pension fund investments. The action taken by the board were to terminate the Allianz convertible strategy and invest the funds with the BlackRock S&P 500 fund with the use of a transition manager, and also to terminate the Allianz Managed Futures Fund with proceeds reinvested with existing investment managers, 60% to Systematica and 40% to Lynx. The votes were 12-0 with the following board members in favor of the motion: Carol Broad, Tom Battaglia, Karina Coleman, Charlie Hodquist, Paul Kaufman, George Kenny, Lou Maggi, Michael McBride, Thanasi Priovalos, Clifford Shearson, Bobby Spoon, and Jeff Wallace. Additionally, the board met in closed session today to discuss initiation of litigation. The action taken by the board is to authorize the General Counsel to retain the Noonan Law Firm and initiate litigation concerning the benefits of Robin Cervantes. The votes were 8-0 with the following board members in favor: Karina Coleman, Brett Bartolotta, Charlie Hodquist, Paul Lotz, Lou Maggi, Sarah Mayen, Cliff Shearson, and Bobby Spoon. That concludes our report out.
Okay, great. I will ask if there is any more business. Hearing none, then I am going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karina.
Thank you.
Karina. Nice job.
Thank you.
Goodbye.